There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles with Sweetfish Media. I'm joined today by Josh Steimle. He is the founder and CEO at MWI. He's also the founder of Influencer Inc. Josh, how you doing today, man?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Logan.
It is a pleasure to have you on the show again, and I'm really excited to do my first interview with you. You're obviously a repeat guest here on B2B Growth, but for folks, Josh, that don't know you as well as James and the team over here at Sweetfish, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your background and what your team's up to these days, man.
Sure. Short story. I started a marketing agency about 20 years ago when I was a college student called MWI. Went through a lot of ups and downs. In 2013, I brought on a partner, Corey Blake, which really helped turn things around. And I got the opportunity to write for Forbes magazine, which entirely changed my life and changed the course of the business and led to a lot of opportunities for writing and speaking and a book deal and all sorts of things. And about 2 years ago, I had a lot of inquiries from people asking me about personal branding and influence and thought leadership because of what I was doing at Forbes and other publications. So I launched a second company called Influencer Inc., and we do coaching, training courses, and all sorts of things related to helping people to maximize their personal influence, build their personal brands, and engage in thought leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Such important stuff for people who want to make a name for themselves and be known these days. Still doing some LinkedIn profile breakdowns and stuff like that, Josh?
Yeah, so I'm loving LinkedIn the past 2 years or so. It's been a great place for me to hang out. My audience is there, and I've loved figuring out the system and how it works. And so I share a lot of LinkedIn tips on my LinkedIn profile and on Instagram, and we have a LinkedIn course that we've launched. And yeah, I love LinkedIn.
Oh, nice, man. I didn't know about your LinkedIn course. People will definitely have to check that out. We'll link to that in the show notes. I definitely recommend to listeners that you are a must follow on LinkedIn for great stuff on personal branding and also just ins and outs of what you've learned on maximizing what you can out of your engagement on LinkedIn. So I love that. All right. Well, Josh, as you and I had talked about before we hit record, this is an episode for our content-based networking series. So we're going to be talking about how you can use content collaboration to reverse engineer the relationships that can be vitally important to your success, both personally and professionally. It's got implications, obviously, for salespeople, for account-based marketing, and really anyone, because as James and I talk about a lot, name something in your life that is good other than maybe the weather that doesn't come back to relationships. So you have been a master at leveraging content-based networking for some time. We're going to talk a little bit about your writing for Forbes, Entrepeneur, Mashable, some other big names that you've already touched on here. But I would love to back it up and go to a story that you shared with me a little bit back in your college days where you really started using this methodology.
Yeah, that first experience I had was, we're talking 1999 maybe. And the company that was really hot in the news back then was JetBlue. JetBlue was just starting as an airline. And here I am, I'm a young college student, but I'm an aspiring entrepreneur. And I thought, man, I would love to talk to David Neeleman. He's the founder of JetBlue. And we have a connection through the church that we belong to. But I mean, we're talking like we're the same religion, but not that we like go to the same congregation or anything. So I was like, well, I've got
Right.
this little connection through our church, but like this guy's still like way up there, high flying CEO, literally, and everything. And so I was like, I want to talk to this guy. I want to get some advice, but how do I do this? I can't just say, like, hey, I want to talk to him and get advice. I felt like that would be awkward. But I was trying to launch a publication at the time, an online magazine. So I reached out to the generic email on the JetBlue website and I sent a message and I said, hey, I'm a college student. I'm launching this business publication and I'd love to interview David and get his advice on entrepreneurship and running a business and such. And a week later, I got this email back saying, yep, let us know which of these times works for you. We'll give you a half-hour slot. And I got to interview David Neeleman, this hot CEO that everybody was trying to interview at the time. And here I am. I'm just a little college student. I'm a nobody. And I got to essentially sit down with him for a half hour and pick his brain and get this advice on how to be a better entrepreneur. And that was the first experience I had where I thought, man, this is incredible. If I offer people the opportunity to be part of my content, they'll talk to me and they'll open up and they'll tell me things. And it ends up being this win-win. And I've used that method since over and over and over again.
Yeah, I love that. Was it just literally one email to the generic email at JetBlue? Was there some other follow-up or anything like that? I'm just curious to kind of get granular there. Obviously, it was a while back, to say the least, but what can you remember? Was it just one email, then got the response, and then you were kind of jaw hit the floor as you were looking at your inbox as a young college kid?
Yeah, it was one email. I literally went to the JetBlue website, scrolled all the way to the bottom, clicked on the About link or the Contact Us link, and there was an email saying, for general inquiries, send an email here, which of course, that email normally goes somewhere that nobody ever responds to those. But I sent an email and in 1 week, I get an email from David Neeleman's personal secretary, and she set it all up and we had the conversation. So yeah, I mean, it was that easy and it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk to a lot of people who are somewhat hesitant to start using content-based networking because they say, well, we don't have an audience yet. So, people just aren't going to respond. And in this scenario, you can make an argument that just simply wasn't the case. I can't say that will be it 100% of the time, but it sounds like for the effort it was worth and the reward, it was worth that little bit of risk that they could say no because, hey, what audience does this college kid have, right?
Yeah, but I mean, what's the worst that could happen? I mean, somebody says no, you get no response. Like, nothing bad is going to happen. It took me all of 20 seconds to send off this email. So I figured, what have I got to lose? I've got everything to win, nothing to lose. Might as well try this out. And hey, it worked. And I found that, I mean, I've been able to interview amazing people before I ever wrote for Forbes, before I ever started doing higher profile media stuff. I was still able to get in touch with a lot of high profile people. I think we assume that these people are too busy. They don't want to talk to us, that you have to be some big reporter or something, some big name or associated with a big name. And it's just not the case. A lot of times these people are much easier to contact than you would think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do you think it is that subtle tweak of, even though, I'm not a big name, I might not have a huge audience, if they really ask, like, who's checking out your online magazine these days? What's your readership? That sort of stuff. But it's the tweak from, hey, can I pick your brain just personally and selfishly, to, I'm still going to be picking your brain, but I'm going to highlight you in some piece of content. So that little mental shift of give rather than take is really what makes the difference there.
I think that's part of it. It breaks down the barriers. When you say, I want to interview you, I want to help you spread your message, I want to give you publicity, I think people realize, okay, they're giving me something. And I've interviewed, I did a virtual summit about a year and a half ago, and I interviewed 70 people for that virtual summit. Not a single one of those people asked me how big it was going to be, how many people were going to attend, nothing like that. They just said, sure. And I was asking for an hour of their time. And these were some really high profile, big people. And yet nobody asked that question. They just said, sure, yeah, I'll do it. Most of them. And I've seen the same thing with other people. I was on somebody's show yesterday and she does a Facebook Live thing. She gets 30 people on this Facebook Live thing, but she's had Seth Godin on. She's had all sorts of high profile people on. So you don't have to have a huge audience or a big name in order to get big people on.
I love that. So, Josh, tell us a little bit more as you kind of grew in your career and you continued to use this methodology of content-based networking. What were some of your thoughts as you started to write for Forbes and continued to use this framework? What were some of the thoughts going through your head? What were some of the ways that you leveraged then, even having an audience and having a name of a publication to build some relationships that you wanted to build or get some knowledge from someone that you wanted to interview?
Yeah, once I was writing for Forbes, then it was like the big guns, right? Because I've got this brand that everybody has heard of. And I knew I could reach out to almost anybody and they would probably talk to me just because of the Forbes name. And so here I am, I'm running a small marketing agency and I'm thinking, who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to get through? Which gatekeepers do I want to bypass so that I can get to this big person at whatever company? And there are people that if I called up and I said, hey, I run a marketing agency and I'd like to talk to your chief marketing officer, there's no way I'd ever get through. But if I call up and I say, hey, I'm a contributor to Forbes magazine, I'm writing an article about marketing, I'd love to talk to your CMO. Yeah, they'll just usher me right on through and say thank you. And they'll act like I'm doing them a favor. And now I've established that relationship and I've got that connection. And of course, every time I send them an email in my footer, it says that I'm the CEO of my marketing agency. And so that wasn't the reason I wrote all the articles in Forbes that I wrote. But did I do that once in a while? Yeah, definitely. Because it was a win-win. It was, hey, I can get a hold of this big person. I can write a great article. That makes Forbes happy. That makes my readers at Forbes happy. But I'm also getting this great connection in this relationship that I know has the potential to benefit me personally in my business interests.
Absolutely. For me, it's the shift in, content marketing. We all understand as marketers, it's creating content for your ideal buyers, for the buyer personas that you're trying to connect with in your target market. When you go the route of content-based networking, you're still doing that. You're still creating great content. As you mentioned, your readers of your content that were finding your articles via Forbes were still appreciative of that content, but you weren't just waiting for that CMO at that company that you wanted to work with to find that article. You were going straight to them, kind of end around the typical content marketing process, still getting the content benefit, but going directly to them to create content with them instead of just for them, so that you're playing both the short game and the long game, right?
Right. Because then it's this collaborative effort. You're on the same team, you're working together, you're talking more as friends and associates and collaborators. And that changes the whole relationship it gets through all these barriers that you would normally try to get through by just doing an end run, like you were saying. You just run around and all of a sudden you're there and you're in that relationship and you didn't have to go through these 10 steps that you would normally have to go through to get to that point.
Yeah, like you said, you're ushered in through the lane of PR rather than the lane of, hey, someone wants to talk directly about doing business with you and wants to have a 15-minute qualification to learn about your business goals, right? The frame of the conversation and the beginning of that relationship is staged entirely differently. So it was actually through your writing with Forbes that you ended up getting your first book deal. Is that right, Josh?
Yeah. So I leveraged the Forbes writing that I was doing to get the book deal. And the whole reason for the book was that I'm running this marketing agency. And actually what happened is we went in to pitch a client. And on the day that we went in, actually we had already pitched the client. We had the deal. We just needed to get the contract signed. We went into this client's business, to get the contract signed. And they usher us into a boardroom. And there's this woman in there we've never met before, which is always a bad sign when you go in to sign a contract.
Right.
And she says, hey, I'm the new CMO here and nobody's signing anything about marketing until I say so. And she didn't want to sign the contract. She wanted to examine it more. And we ended up not getting that deal that we already had closed. We just had to sign it. I was like, dang it, we should have come here a day earlier to get this signed.
Right.
But as a result of that, it started this internal discussion at our business about, how do we appeal to these CMOs so that they like us and they trust us and they see us as the agency that they want to work with? And the first idea was, well, let's write a book about digital marketing, but geared towards CMOs. So that will, like the CMO's Guide to Digital Marketing, something like that. And that was the first idea. And then as I started working on that book, I realized I don't really know that much about CMOs. I mean, yes, I run a marketing agency, but I've never been a CMO. I've never really been in their shoes. And before I write this book for CMOs, I need to do some more research. So then the idea came, well, maybe I should go out and interview a bunch of CMOs and just turn that into a book. And so that's what I ended up doing is I went out and I interviewed 30 CMOs from companies like PayPal, Spotify, Target, and a bunch of others, some companies big, some small. And that became the book that we released. And that generated one, relationships. It was great that way because I made relationships with all these amazing CMOs and marketing people, which was great information for me. It was just educational and it was fascinating. Two, these were just great business relationships. And three, the end result was I had this book that I could give to other CMOs and say, hey, I wrote the book on CMOs. I interviewed all these CMOs. And then that we've used that book as a marketing tool. Since then, we send that out to all sorts of people in it. So it was just this win-win-win every which way around.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the Forbes name that got me in there. So I was able to go into these people and say, hey, I write for Forbes and these other publications. I'm writing this book. I'd love to interview you for it. And yeah, it opened up so many doors to go in that way. I mean, I was able to interview Linda Boff. She's the CMO of GE. Jeff Jones, he was the CEO of Target. He went on to work for Uber and now he's the head of H&R Block. I mean, I was able to get through these people that I never would have been able to get an hour of time with any other way.
Yeah, I love that. And I love seeing the progression. The methodology you're using in content-based networking is really the same from when you were a college kid to when you were writing for Forbes and then writing your first book. But that flywheel of just win-win-wins all the way around, as you mentioned, Josh, it gives you the ability to build relationships with the people that you want to interview. It makes the content of your book better as opposed to doing independent research, trying to get inside the heads of CMOs. You're actually talking to them. So it makes that more efficient and the content better. And now you have an asset to share with more CMOs. And so that's just three benefits of it right there. And I love seeing this progression of how you continually use content collaboration to create wins for yourself and wins for the people that you are building relationships with, as well as you're delivering real tangible value to them. Josh, if people listening to this have thought about this idea, maybe they're already using content-based networking, maybe in some channels like maybe their webinars or events, maybe podcasting. There's lots of different ways to do it. What would you recommend as we kind of wrap up today? Give people some actionable next steps or things to keep in mind as they think about this idea of collaborating on content with the people they want to build relationships with.
I think one of the important points is that it has to be a medium that is something that you can keep up with. It's something that you enjoy doing, because we've tried a lot of things. We've tried video, we've tried podcasts, and what we keep coming back to is writing, because I enjoy writing. I like do it. I would write regardless of whether anybody was reading it or not, because I enjoy writing. And so it makes it very easy for me to reach out to a lot of people, connect with a lot of people, and produce a lot of written materials, books, articles, blog posts, etc. But somebody else might say, well, I hate writing. Well, they shouldn't be writing then. They shouldn't try to force themselves into that. They should focus on podcasts if they enjoy that, or they should do videos if they enjoy that. But whatever comes easy for you, that's the medium that you probably want to focus on to make these connections and use content-based networking, because it's just going to happen easier. It's going to flow.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great advice. As obviously we're bullish on podcasting and using this strategy, but as we've said here, that's not the only way that you can collaborate on content with your ideal buyers or with people that you want to build relationships with. And I think that's great advice. Lean into the medium that you can keep going, that you are energized by. You know, for me, hopping behind the microphone is way easier than getting ready for video. Other marketers I know, like Dave Gerhardt at Drift, he's great at turning on the video, creating raw video content where he's comfortable and can share, his authentic point of view very quickly, and it's scalable for him. Podcasting's more scalable for me. Writing is more scalable for you and other folks I know, like Matt Hines. And so I think that's great advice to leave people with. Josh, any other thoughts or recommendations you would give to folks?
The other side of that is that you also have to be thinking about your audience. If your audience is hanging out somewhere that is written content, if they're reading Forbes magazine and they don't listen to podcasts, then obviously you do have to take that into consideration, that there's a combination there between what your passion is or what you find easy to do and where your audience is hanging out and the way that they choose to consume the type of content that you're trying to get to them or the type of information that you're trying to get to them.
Absolutely. Well, Josh, I think those are great two final things for folks to keep in mind as they look at how they can use content-based networking, whether they are a marketer, a salesperson, someone trying to build a business or advance in their career. I think there's tons of applications, and you've given some very tangible ways throughout your career, no matter what level you're at. I think people can learn something from the stories you shared. I've already mentioned you are a must follow, in my opinion, on LinkedIn. Other than reaching out on LinkedIn, what's the best way for folks to find out what you're up to, follow up with you with questions, or just to stay connected?
LinkedIn's great, but also my personal website is joshsteimle.com.
Awesome. I love it, Josh. Well, thanks again for being a guest on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation, man.
Thank you so much, Logan, for having me on.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. You know, all those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.